Chapter 3. Chapter 3. I've already skipped over a bit, and there's just one line that I will omit from the reading. It doesn't really, it's not a line that gives too much information. So okay, Neil Gaiman could have technically not had that line, but I will not be reading it. Just to let you guys know, Neil Gaiman, what he tried to do with Stardust was a fairy tale for adults. This book is technically not for children at all. But the movie itself it's a lot safer. There's nothing, and if you are very conscious, like self-aware of any scenes or whatever, no, you can. The movie is safe. And why I am omitting it's for the every chapter I'm gonna check it out before. It's just to I like to have a clean channel, and I was not expecting to be the book to be so different from the movie itself. So some of you may care, some of you may not care, but I have to tell you guys the information. So what do you think of my butterflies? I got butterflies in my hair. I feel like I was somewhat attacked. Luckily, I love butterflies. So, like I have done with chapter 1 and chapter 2, I will be doing part 1 of the third chapter, and then a part 2 of the third chapter. This book has 10 chapters. And if you just heard that, it's thundering outside. And the alarm just went off in the car. So, just a little extra ASMR for you. Rain and lightning and thunder. So, okay, let's get started on chapter 3. Look at this pretty picture. Pretty picture. That's their dad, the king of Stronghold, I believe. Okay, let's get into this. Okay, chapter 3, which introduces several other persons, many of them still alive, with an interest in the fate of the falling star. Ooh, eerie. The Stormhold had been carved out of the peak of Mount Huon by the first lord of the Stormhold, who reigned at the end of the first age and into the beginning of the second. It had been expanded, improved upon, excavated, and tunneled into by successive masters of Stormhold, until the original mountain peak now raked the sky like the ornately carved tusk of some great gray granite beast. The Stormhold was high in the sky, where the thunder clouds gathered before they went down to lower air, spilling rain and lightning and devastation upon the place beneath. The 81st Lord of Stormhold lay dying in his chamber, carved from the highest peak like a hole in the rotten tooth. For there is still death in the lands beyond the field we know. He summoned his children to his bedside, and they came, the living and the dead of them, and they shivered in the cold granite halls. They gathered about his bed and waited respectfully, the living to his left side and the dead on his right. 4 of his sons were dead, Secundus, Quintus, Quartus, and Sextus, and they stood unmoving, grave figures, insubstantial and silent. 3 of his sons remained alive, Primus, Tertius, and Septimus. They stood solidly, uncomfortably, on the left of the chamber, shifting from foot to foot, scratching their cheeks and noses as if they were shamed by the silent response of their dead brothers. They did not glance across the room towards their dead brothers, acting as best they could, as if they and their father were the only ones in the cold room, where the windows were huge holes in the granite and the cold winds blew through them. Whether this is because they could not see their dead brothers, or because, having murdered them, one apiece, but Septimus had killed both Quintus and Sextus, poisoning the former with a dish of spiced eels, while rejecting artifice for efficiency and gravity, simply pushing Sextus off the precipice one night, as they were admiring the lightning storm far below them. They chose to ignore them, scared of guilt or revelation or ghost. Their father did not know. Privately, the 8 First Lord had hoped that by the time his end came to him, 6 of the 7 young lords of Stormhold would be dead, but one still alive, and that one would be the 82nd Lord of Stormhold and Master of High Crags. It was, after all, how he had attained the title several hundred years before. Picture. But the youth of today were a pasty lot, with none of the get up and go, none of the vigor and vim that he remembered from the days when he was young. Somebody was saying something. He forced himself to concentrate. Father, repeated Primus, in his deep boom of a voice. We're all here. What would you with us? The old man stared at him. He pulled a breath of thin, chill air into his lungs with a ghastly wheezing, and then said in high, cold tones like the granite itself, I'm dying. Soon my time will be done, and you will take my remains deep into the mountain to the hall of ancestors, and you will place me, in the 1/80th hollow you come to, which is to say, the first that is not occupied, and there you shall leave me. If you do not do this thing, you will each be cursed, and the tower of Stormhold shall tumble and fall. His 3 living sons said nothing. There was a murmur ran through the 4 dead sons, though regret perhaps that their remains had been gobbled up by eagles or carried away by the fast rivers, tumbled down waterfalls, and off to the sea, never to rest in the hall of ancestors. Now the matter of secession, the old man's voice wheezed out of him, like the wind being squeezed from a pair of rotten bellows. His living sons raised their heads. Primus, the oldest, with white hairs in his beard, his nose aquiline, his eyes gray, looked expectant. Tertius, his beard red and golden, his eyes a tawny brown, looked wary. Septimus, his black beard still coming in, tall and crow-like, looked blank, as he always Primus, go to the window. Primus strode over to the opening in the rock wall and looked out. What do you see? Nothing, sire. I see the evening sky above us and the clouds below us. The old man shivered beneath the mountain bare skin and covered him. Tertius, go to the window. What do you see? Nothing, father. It is as Primus told you. The evening sky hangs above us, the color of a bruise, and clouds carpet the world beneath us, all gray and writhing. The old man's eyes twisted in his face like the mad eye of a bird of prey. Septimus, you, window. Septimus strode to the window and stood beside, although not too close to his two elder brothers. And you, what do you see? He looked out of the opening. The wind was bitter on his face, and it made his eyes sting and tear. One star glimmered faintly in the indigo heavens. I see a star, father. Ah, wheezed the 81st Lord. Bring me to the window. His 4 dead sons looked at him sadly as his 3 living sons carried him to the window. The old man stood, or almost stood, leaning heavily on the broad shoulders of his children, staring into the leaden sky. His fingers, swollen knuckles, and twig-like fumble with the topaz that hung on a heavy silver chain about his neck. The chain parted like a cobweb in the old man's grip. He held the topaz out of his fist, the broken ends of the silver chain dangling. The dead lords of Stormhold whispered amongst themselves in the voices of the dead, which sound like snow falling. The topaz was the power of Stormhold. Who wore it would be Stormhold's master, if he was of blood of Stormhold, to which of surviving sons would the 81st Lord give the stone. The living sons said nothing, but looked respectively and expectant, wary, and blank. But it was the deceptive blankness of a rock face that one only releases cannot be climbed when one is halfway up and there is no longer any way down. The old man pulled free of his sons and stood straight and tall. Then he was, for a heartbeat, the Lord Stormhold, who had defeated the northern goblins at the Battle of Craglands Head, who had fathered 8 children, 7 of them boys, and 3 wives, who had killed each of his 4 brothers in combat before he was 20 years old, although his older brother had been almost 5 times his age, and a mighty warrior of great renown. It was that man who held up the topaz and said 4 words in a long dead tongue, words which hung on the air like the strokes of huge bronze gong. The picture. Then he threw the stone into the air. The living brothers caught their breath as the stone arched up over the clouds. Excuse me. It reached what they were certain must be the zenith of its curve, and then, defying all reason, it continued to rise into the air. Other stars glittered in the night sky now. To him who retrieves the stone, which is the power of Stormhold, I leave my blessing and the mastership of Stormhold and all its dominions, said the 81st Lord, his voice losing power as he spoke until once again it was the creak of an old man, like the wind blowing through an abandoned house. The brothers brothers, living and dead, stared at the stone. It fell upwards into the sky until it was lost to sight. And should we capture eagles and harness them to drag us into the heavens? Asked Tertius, puzzled and annoyed. His father said nothing. The last of the daylight phased, and the stars hung above them, uncountable in their glory. One star fell. Tertius thought, although he was not certain, that it was the first star of the evening, the one that his brother Septimus had remarked upon. The star tumbled in a streak out of light behind it through the night sky, and it tumbled down somewhere to the south and west of them. There whispered the 81st Lord, and he fell to the stone floor of his chamber, and he breathed no more. There they are. Primus scratched his beard and looked down at the crumpled thing. I have in mind, he said, to push the old bastard corpse out of the window. What was all that idiocy about? Better not, said Tertius, not sure I like Stormhold to tumble and fall, nor a curse for that matter. Better just place him in the Hall of Ancestors. Primus picked his father's body up and carried him back to the foot of his bed. We will tell the people he is dead, he said. The four dead brothers clustered with Septimus at the window. What do you think he's thinking? Asked Quintus and Sextus. He's wondering where the stone fell and how to reach it first, said Sextus, remembering his fall down the rocks and into eternity. I damn well hope so, said the late 81st Master of Stormhold to his four dead sons, but his three sons, who were not yet dead, heard nothing at all. A question like how big is Fairy does not admit of a simple answer. Fairy, after all, is not one land, one principality or dominion. Maps of Fairy are unreliable and may not be depended upon. We talk of the kings and queens of Fairy as we would speak of kings and queens of England, but Fairy is bigger than England, as it is bigger than the world. For since the dawn of time, each land that has been forced off the map by explorers and the brave going out proving it wasn't there has taken refuge in Fairy. So it is now by the time that we come to write of it, a most huge place indeed, containing every manner of landscape and terrain. Here truly there be dragons, also griffins and wyverns, hippogriffs, basilisks, and hydras. They are all manner of more familiar animal as well. Cats affectionate, and aloof dogs, noble and cowardly, wolves and foxes, eagles and bears. In the middle of the wood, so thick and deep it was very nearly a forest, was a small house built of thatch and wood and daubed gray clay, which had most foreboding aspect. A small yellow bird in a cage sat on its perch outside the house. It did not sing, but sat mournfully upon the perch, feathers ruffled, and when there was a door to the cottage from which the once white paint was peeling away. There's this page. Inside the cottage consisted consisted of one room, undivided smoked meats and sausages hung from the rafters along the Wisnen crocodile. A peat fire burned smokily in the large fireplace against one wall, and the smoke trickled out of the chimney far above. There were 3 blankets upon 3 raised beds, one large and old, and the other 2 little more than truckle beds. There were cooking implements in a large wooden cage, currently empty. In another corner there were windows of filthy to see through, and over everything was a thick layer of oily dust. The only thing in the house that was clean was a mirror of black glass, as high as a tall man, as wide as a church door, which rested against one wall. The house belonged to 3 aged women. They took it in turns to sleep in the big bed, to make the supper, to set snares in the wood for small animals, to draw water up from the deep well behind the house. The 3 women spoke little. There were 3 other women in the little house. They were slim and dark and amused, and the hall they inhabited was many times the size of the cottage. The floor was of onyx, the pillars were of obsidian. There was a courtyard behind them open to the sky, and stars hung in the night above. A fountain played in the courtyard, the water rolling and falling from a statue of a mermaid in ecstasy, her mouth wide open. Clean black water gushed from her mouth into the pool below, shimmering and shaking the stars. Okay, so this is gonna be the end of